Hey, folks.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everyone. We'll give people a couple more minutes and we'll get started in about 2 minutes here. Okay, we're going to get started here. Welcome to our first AMA on YouTube, Ask Me Anything, with Timeline. So we're live here from the Timeline HQ in Switzerland. Some of you probably already know this, but we're still based where we were born. We were born at the Swiss Federal Technology Institute, sort of the MIT, I guess you could say, equivalent here in Europe, here in Switzerland. And here to my left, you have Dr. Anurag Singh, who I'll introduce in just a moment. But yeah, thank you very much for joining, for taking the time out of your busy schedules. We've been overwhelmed with the interest in our science, in our research, and the importance of mitochondrial health. And the best testament to that is the long list of, I've got several pages here of questions that we've received from all of you, as well as I'm sure some great questions that will come through live during the session. So yeah, so there's a live chat tool on your screen, if you're on a PC, probably to your right, where you can enter any questions and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. We do have, this is the first one we've done, and we're doing this we're doing one a week during the month of January. So you'll have the opportunity to join other sessions as well. And we'll follow up with via email as well. So I'm Federico Luna. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Timeline. I joined this innovative Swiss longevity biotech over 5 years ago and still very excited to be here. The company was, as I mentioned, founded here at the PFL, really with the vision of essentially understanding with the top cutting edge tools of biotech and of science, understanding what makes us age, understanding the hallmarks of aging, and understanding the best interventions, safe and effective interventions to help us age better, stay healthier for longer. So that's what we're all about, and that's what we've been doing for over 15 years now. We actually turned over 15 just recently. So to my left, as I mentioned, we've got, I think one of the world experts in really this new longevity field. So Dr. Anurag Singh is both a medical doctor as well as a PhD. So he's a physician scientist. He did his PhD in immunology. Prior to joining Timeline, he was clinical development director at Nestlé Health Science, one of the leading nutrition companies in this healthy aging space. And over the years, he's led over 40 clinical trials and has been published in top peer-reviewed journals, including Nature Medicine, Nature Metabolism, Cell Reports, and many others. So truly a great resource, and I'm delighted that we're able to have him here with us today live to answer some questions.
Pleasure being here, Federico.
Welcome, Anurag.
And great to answer all your questions.
Okay.
Get started.
So just a quick disclaimer before we get started. Anurag is a phenomenal doctor, but he is not my doctor or your doctor, and as such, he's not here to provide medical advice. So please make sure you do speak to your personal physician if you have any questions about this session. This session is provided purely for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Good. So let's jump straight in. So Anurag, before I get to the questions from the group, my question to you is, how did you end up in this field?
Sure.
How did you end up at Timeline? And why are you still here almost 8 years later?
Sure, great question. So, well, as Federico mentioned, I'm a physician scientist by training. So my initial training was in internal medicine, where I realized a lot of the modern medicine approaches were all, tackling the symptoms, but not really the root cause of how we age or how we, have these chronic conditions as we age. And so that got me interested in research, and I started, as you mentioned, got a PhD in the US in immunology, and trained to be a physician scientist. And the gentleman professor I was working with was highly interested in a compound coming from pineapples that we found was as effective as any modern asthma medication, for example. So that got me interested in the natural product space, and that technology led me to Nestlé. And then I realized that, even at big companies where, what you really needed was a thorough biotech approach to figuring out how these natural compounds work. And lo and behold, so I've been in the field of longevity for close to 20 years. My interests initially were in really dissecting how the immune system ages in old, frail people, and really finding things like, and that got me into Nestlé, looking at probiotics, a lot of beta glucans, which are prebiotics, and to Amazentis, 9 years plus, not 8, 9 years. And really this beautiful molecule that we'll talk about and how we came across it over 10 plus years of research now on humans.
Great. Okay. Well, let's jump into to questions. So we've got over 50 questions here that we've received. Thank you again for sending those through. So let's get started. In no particular order, but one that we get a lot is around combinations. So the first question here for you is, can MitoPure be taken alongside NMN, NR, CoQ10, or does it replace the need for those?
Yeah, and that's a very important question, because I know a lot of people are trying multiple things to improve their mitochondrial health, which, as we all know, is the absolute key hallmark of aging. So what happens to improve mitochondrial function, you need to hit it through 3 ways, okay? One is you can grow newer healthy mitochondria. This is what we call biogenesis, and that's where all these NR, NAD boosters like NMN fit in. The second pathway is, well, you take your pool of healthy mitochondria and you make them more energetic. So you that's where CoQ10, coenzyme CoQ10 fits in. But what has not been really attacked in the past is that you actually need to clear out the waste inside the mitochondria. And that's where MitoPure and urolithin A is so unique, because it actually is probably the only clinically proven and safe nutrient to activate mitophagy, which cleans out the waste. And then you can possibly think about combining it with NAD modulators or CoQ10. In our clinical trials, what we see is actually following mitophagy, you do see increase in biogenesis. You see also in certain ex vivo systems improved NAD production. So I believe MitoPure is essential for improving really the foundation of your mitochondrial health. And then you can actually think about supplementing if you want to, if you desire even a bit more energy and tackle with other nutrients like NAD modulators. But MitoPure should be enough to kind of hit.
So what I'm hearing from you, if I understand correctly, is there may be synergistic effects.
Yeah.
Still to be proven, obviously, in clinical trials. Yeah. But MitoPure on its own actually has, in a way, a 2-in-1 effect, because it's doing mitophagy first, making sure it's clearing out the waste, and then also having that downstream impact on biogenesis.
You got it. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, super. Okay, let's take one from the live here, the live session. So a question: what is the recommended dosage for a 96-year-old? That is amazing. Thank you, Magda, for that question.
So one of our first, a lot of our initial clinical studies were actually aimed at older adults. This product was initially, a lot of it was research in the 70+ population. And the oldest clinical trial participants that I had the pleasure of recruiting in our trials was actually a 90-year-old lady who actually, since it was a blinded study, she didn't know, but she swore she was on the active product and she had more energy, gardening, etc. So in that particular study, today we have tested 2 doses mostly of MitoPure. We have tested the 500 milligram dose of MitoPure, and we have tested the gram.
So 2 pills or 4 pills?
So each pill has 250 milligram, and so we've tested 2 pills or 4 pills a day in numerous randomized clinical trials. What we see is the gram dose has a much faster effect on mitophagy. So if at a month long interval of supplementation, if you were to look at mitochondrial health in the muscle of older adults, much like a 90-year-old, you would see much more mitochondrial improvement. Doesn't mean 500 milligrams is not doing it. It's just at a scale that you're seeing a dose response effect. When we go longer in 4-month trials, we see similar effects on, for example, improvement in leg strength after 4 months. Now, where a gram dose in at least clinical trials is showing a bit more better data is on its anti-inflammatory effects, so things like lowering CRP. These are, which is basically C-reactive protein, which is a biomarker of poor immune health, right? So what I mean to say is that if you're old, or if you feel you're fatigued, if you feel the need of getting the engine revved up, start with the higher dose of a gram, and then you can always, once you start feeling the effects, either continue or tighter it down to 500 milligrams. We haven't done clinical studies on that for sure, but I think for a 96-year-old, as a medical doctor and having done the science, I would recommend a gram dose to start off with.
Okay, and just to clarify, the different products, the different formats, they all have the same dose, they have different doses?
So we have tested obviously the soft gels the most. This is the format, at least in long or randomized trials, the easiest to maintain compliance. But we've also tested what we call as bioequivalence between the powders that we have, which also have 500 milligram daily dose versus 2 pills. 1 pack of a berry product that we sell it's equivalent to 2 pills, and they both work the same. They give you the same blood levels of urolithin in plasma, and they're 6 times better than drinking a glass of pomegranates. So you can choose any one of them.
Okay, super. So let's continue here with the questions from the audience here. So so just another one back to sort of interactions, maybe.
Yeah.
How does it interact potentially with metformin, or how would it compare, or do we have any preclinical data where we look at life extension versus metformin, for example?
So we've never done a head-to-head in clinical evidence in models of aging, and so a lot of the earlier discovery work was done by one of the top mitochondrial researchers, Professor Johan Albrigts, and the models that they study is these worms, because these worms live around 20 to 30 days, and you can very fast study the effect of, let's say, metformin versus urolithin A. And so what he found was that caloric restriction was the best, close to 50% improvement in life extension and pathways that link to life extension and healthy aging. Urolithin A was the number 2, so close to 45%. Metformin came in the third, about close to 40%, and the NAD modulators were around 20%. Resveratrol was even lower in that kind of testing format. So can you combine it with metformin? Well, metformin just is one of the oldest drugs used for diabetes. This goes back to my earlier medical practice days where I was giving it. I trained initially in India, where half the population adults is diabetic. It's a safe drug, and so now it's in the market for 30 plus years, and people want to test it as a longevity. But it hits so many pathways that people are still confused at how it works. And it's a drug, right? So it's not like urolithin A, which is a very safe natural compound that can also be derived from different exposure to diets. And obviously through our MitoPure product, you can titrate it to get direct levels. So head to head, I would say that MitoPure mechanism, as we talked about, is mitophagy. Metformin is more AMPK, which is biogenesis. So it's similar to NAD modulator.
Okay, super. So just on the last point, you mentioned the pomegranate. There's a question here around, have we looked at the microbiome part of it and understanding whether, rather than taking MitoPure, could you potentially take a probiotic that would help you essentially produce urolithin A? What are your thoughts on that?
So we've looked at it. We've gone around the world and tons of randomized trials. And so we looked at the French, how much they produce naturally urolithin A. They're actually one of the highest, the French. I'm guessing there's some French paradox, a lot of wine, fermented foods, cheese, etc. We looked in the American and the Canadian populations. It's about, if you look at healthy adults, it's only about 10 to 12% coming in with, let's say, real world levels of urolithin A. And then when you give them pomegranate juice, which is fresh 100% juice, you see about 40% can convert. But the conversion is not binary. It's not like one molecule of the dietary polyphenols will give you urolithin A in plasma. And so what we see is a very wide range of plasma levels, which in a lot of cases are sub-health benefit levels. Now, you talked about the microbiome. The microbiome is a very key factor in this conversion. And we've looked at people who are what I call blessed, so they can naturally make the molecule versus like me. Actually, I don't make the molecule naturally. And we looked at the gut microbiome of these people, and it's in stark contrast. So people like me who can make it have what we call as a very poor diverse microbiome. So those, in comparison to those who are making it, they have a very diverse. So they have millions of species of healthy bacteria, and they are, Now, can you take a probiotic? This is $1 million question. We've spent 5 years studying it. It's not easy to answer that because the gut microbiome is a very complex ecosystem. So I honestly won't believe anybody who will say that I found one single strain out of that it can.
It's the biggest pharmacy in the world.
Convert. It is the biggest pharmacy in the world, but I think the pharmacy acts like a symphony, like an orchestra, and you need to have different strains in perfect harmony to yield what I call the perfect output, which is urolithin A, right? The postbiotic. So I think for those who are lucky, they can certainly eat more berries, they can eat more pomegranate juice, and they will boost their levels. And we've developed a test actually for folks which is in prototype phase.
Okay. So we're going to take a couple more from the audience here. Yeah. Dimitri's asking, can you provide some highlights on the impact of VO2 max or on VO2 max of taking urolithin A/MitoPure?
Yeah, so that's one of the big outcome measures we test in a lot of our randomized trials in a trial.
Can you maybe explain VO2 max and its importance?
Yeah, so VO2 max is a measure of aerobic endurance. It's the old way of, let's say, telling you how good your mitochondrial health is. And a lot of times VO2 max, for example, in athletes, if you measure it's like the gas exchange. So how good is your oxygen consumption capacity? That's essentially what we're calling its peak VO2 or VO2 max, which is the maximum limit. And to push more energy, which is this metric of VO2, you need good mitochondria health. And so that's been used in in a lot of clinical research settings to evaluate aerobic endurance and the impact of nutrients such as MitoPure and NAD modulators, or even exercise. It's one of the biggest readouts. So we run trials and we start seeing in folks who are sedentary, not very active, don't eat very well, without changing their diet, without changing their physical activity levels, we can see about a 10% improvement in peak VO2 and VO2 max levels. And that means that this molecule, MitoPure, is actually hitting very similar pathways as an exercise regimen would. We have recently even completed, this is unpublished, of course, a trial in elite middle distance runners who are coming in with VO2 max of 60, 70, which,
Wow.
These are really elite Olympian-like, and we see a similar impact there and even better recovery. So VO2 max is really a marker of aerobic endurance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here around long COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is a product that's not designed for long COVID, not to prevent, not to cure, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
But any thoughts on long COVID, or asked differently, maybe the potential immune benefits, immune health benefits of this?
Yeah, so as you rightly pointed out, we haven't really clinically tested it for long COVID. There's very little. But what the emerging science in long COVID is suggesting is a severe mitochondrial dysfunction in immune cells, in a lot of organs that get hit. So even if you look at cardiac cells of people who have long COVID or had severe COVID, there's a big component is because of mitochondrial abnormalities. And I think this field needs more research.
Mm-hmm.
I think it needs really a lot of public and private and government sector interaction, because almost what I'm reading is about 10 to 20% people get COVID, end up getting long COVID. So that you're going to have a whole tsunami of people who have this condition. I think where nutrients like MitoPure can be positioned is on the immune effect, as you were saying, is how can you turbocharge your immune system during flu, during COVID. And that's a very active area of research. So we are looking at a field that we now call as immune aging. And so that means as we all age, we get more susceptible to flu and COVID and things like this. And if you can rewire the mitochondria inside immune cells with nutrients such as MitoPure, maybe you can make them more healthy, and maybe they will fight certain, let's say, detriments like COVID exposure or flu exposure better.
So we're hearing a lot, the term senescence, immunosenescence, a lot about T cells.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, funny anecdote, I'm a T cell biologist. I started my career as a T cell biologist, studying how they decline with aging and how they change during things like COPD and asthma. And so within the T cell field, what happens during aging is the T cells get exhausted, much like we all feel exhaustion. They also feel exhaustion, and they have the reason they feel exhaustion is because they have mitochondria that are giving them energy. And so every time as we all age, as these T cells become what I call fatigued, you get increased exposure you get more incidence of autoimmune disease, you get more higher incidence of cancer. You also respond very poorly to vaccines. And so I think if you can rev up a lot of these, within these T cells, there is a particular T cell that is a beautiful T cell. It's called a memory T cell. And I call them as the stem cell component of the immune system. So if you can rewire and turbocharge these stem cell memory cells, then you can have almost like a renewed immune system. And so a lot of our research actually is now positioned in this area, and hopefully in the next few months we can share some cool data.
Great. Okay, well, we'll do, we've got a lot of questions to go through here, so let's keep on going. So how does, from Tobias, how does MitoPure differ from any other urolithin A supplements on the market? And Tobias, maybe I'm just going to add proactively add a provocative question to your question, which is, why is it so much more expensive?
Well, let's say we, for 15 years, as you mentioned, we were the ones who said, let's raise the bar for nutrition science. Let's not be like the other guys who just blend vitamins, minerals, and launch products in the market. And so we did the research for 15 years. We did the hard yards of running hundreds of participants in RCTs, and that research obviously costed a lot of money.
We sat with the FDA.
We met with the FDA. We proved the safety to the FDA. We published all these in top journals. Now, and then of course, with your great skill of simplifying the language, we launched these products. And what we see now is, as more and more people are hearing about it, we have these copycat Me Too products, right, that are using our science. They say, sing it all here's, or
they're citing you.
They're citing me.
Putting pictures of you and on their Amazon
and they may
pages.
even take snippets of this and put it on there. So these are what I call Me Too.
Well, are they Me Too? That's the question. Do we even know if they have urolithin A and the purity of the urolithin A and whether it's safe? And
so we, of course, have the highest manufacturing, let's say, standards. We manufacture at GMP and really the highest levels with really the top manufacturing gurus out there. And it's almost like 99.7% pure to the natural molecule. So what
I think the message here, if I may just add, is we do test a lot of these other products, and we won't name specifics here, but I would just say be very careful with any urolithin A you're taking that's not MitoPure. If you want to be safe, send it to a lab, get it tested, and make sure you know exactly what's in there in terms of both the urolithin A component and the purity of that urolithin A, but also the other excipients and other potential ingredients that are in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really top Swiss American quality in manufacturing versus probably all these guys are getting it from China, and we don't know even if it's real urolithin A. So I think that's the message to pass off. Be careful.
Okay. Maybe a last question on the supplements, and we can come back. But what is the best time of day to take the supplement?
Great question.
And for how long?
Yeah. So most of our randomized trials, in fact, every randomized trial, we've the product protocol we've put in place is taking it first thing in the morning after an overnight fasting. Mm-hmm. And the rationale simply at that time was, well, overnight fasting will already induce some level of autophagy, which is sort of the self-renewal inside the cell, and you come in, take MitoPure, and then that boosts even the mitophagy. And using that protocol, we've seen some great data. Now we've of course done on fasted levels, and we've done it with like a heavy meal kind of a setting. It doesn't really change the level of exposure after taking, let's say, powder or 2 pills of MitoPure. So I now think that actually time of the day is not so critical. But having said that, I am a clinical trialist, so I still recommend taking it first thing in the morning. The protocol, which fits well with everybody's, whatever suits your lifestyle. It's the best way.
So shifting gears a little bit, we've got a lot of questions from the audience, and apparently you need to stay a bit closer to the mic or speak a bit louder. A lot of questions around other potential applications for MitoPure, including topical and skin, and maybe you can provide a little bit of the history. What about brain? What about, you mentioned the immune system, and then maybe you could give a bit of a deep dive on skin specifically.
Sure. So, well, when we started, we really tackled muscle, because muscle is the longevity organ, right? If you don't have good muscle strength, you can't move around, and that affects cognitive health, and that obviously accelerates the rate of aging. So what we focused on for a good part of our 10 years was on showing that MitoPure was improving mobility and muscle health. Once we got that, the interest grew, and we started hearing from a lot of top level scientists around the world that, hey, we tested it in models of cognitive decline or models of metabolic imbalance, and you have these great effects. So now where the research is going is that we are actually working with the top institutes like National Institute of Aging and National Institute of Cancer on really tackling how can we improve immune health post-cancer? People who've actually got rid of cancer, they've got through the chemo radio and now their immune system is still compromised. How can you take this supplement of MitoPure and boost your renewable capacity of immune cells? So that's one key area where the research is. The second is brain health. I think that's, everybody arguably should agree that that's really the final frontier. If you can show improved cellular health and you can improve healthy aging, well, you should be at your 80s and 90s, be cognitively very good, right? In addition to moving around better. And so a lot of top researchers, actually 3 independent researchers have come to us showing data that in, of course, experimental models that urolithin A through mitophagy activation was actually having an impact on reducing this cognitive decline. And so we are now launching a randomized trial in that direction. Now, to the last point on skin aging, how did we get to skin aging was, well, a lot of times people would say, well, how do you measure if your product is working? How do I know first thing in the morning? And I thought to myself, and with Chris, our co-founder, who had the same question, that, well, the first thing you see in yourself in the morning is your face, right? That's where you actually think about, oh, am I aging? Are the wrinkles coming, or the hair is graying, or whatever. And so that led to just a simple idea in an office where we put it in a cream and we started to put it on, and we started looking at skin cells. Is MitoPure going to do on ex vivo skin cells the same thing as on muscle cells? And we saw the same effects. We saw mitophagy activation. We saw better health of mitochondria that led to almost 5 randomized trials by now in the last 2-3 years, all showing that actually in the skin cells, there are also mitochondria, and topically applying MitoPure was revving up the mitochondria, activating mitophagy, which in turn would then activate collagen synthesis. So these are things we wouldn't have appreciated just focusing on the muscle. And so that has led to now these topical products that I personally think, if you look at the whole topical field, the cosmetic field, there's hardly any clinical evidence. And so what we're trying to do is really disrupt not just nutrition, but skincare as well. And then together, this is the dream for longevity, right? Solution to have both the aspects combined together.
And you mentioned earlier, maybe in the context of skin, maybe helpful, this idea of inflammation. Do we also see that on skin? How does that fit with this idea of extrinsic aging and the impact of pollution and factors like UV?
So skin aging is of 2 kinds. One is intrinsic aging, which is the cellular aging. So your mitochondria are slowing down, your collagen synthesis is slowing down, etc. And that's probably 30 to 40% component of the entire skin aging. Now, the majority component is what we call extrinsic skin aging, which is the harmful UV rays, as you were mentioning, and the pollution and all kinds of harmful products that sometimes we end up washing our skin, touching our skin. And this accelerates the skin aging even more. And so what we did was we actually ran different settings of randomized trials showing an impact on intrinsic aging, where there are nutrients such as retinol, for example, that do. But then in extrinsic aging, which is really the inflammatory aspect of skin aging through UV, where almost nothing really works, MitoPure was a very potent solution by decreasing skin inflammation by almost about 15% in just about 24 hours after inducing a sunburn. So I personally think this is will be one of the top solutions for tackling skin aging.
Okay, we've got a very good, fair, and provocative question from Mehul. How do we know that all of this is not bull? I understand there's a part of the word missing there. Yeah.
So, well, again, you have to take it from somebody who's been in the industry for 20 years. A lot of times there is a lot of, I don't blame the question and the bias in the question, because a lot of times this is what's happening in the nutrition industry. Oh, I read this paper and I think let's take this prebiotic and this probiotic and this mineral and make a product and just launch it, and it has X and Y benefit. What we have done is we've done 15 years of hard work and research till we actually convinced ourselves. We ran the randomized trials. We showed the benefits, and only then we decided to launch the product. So there is actual science, there's actual clinical evidence. There is top medical doctors, top scientists behind it. If you look at our advisory board, it's really the who's and who. There are top researchers who have
There's tough peer review. Can you maybe share a little bit? How long did it take us to publish our first paper.
Look up any
Nature
other
Medicine.
company that can talk and showcase publications in Cell, Nature, and Science like we do. And I think that it took us 1 year to get our trials published. And a lot of times it's back and forth. Oh, did you ask? Did you give them? Tell them not to drink pomegranate juice? And it's 4 months. Well, of course we did. And then you have to tell them. So it's really, you have to I don't think of any other company that is doing this. And now we're working with really the best of the best in the field.
So a follow-up question from Mehul is, I bought it. Where can I access the research?
You can access the research on our website, timelinenutrition.com. We also have a very dedicated website on mitopure.com, and you can look at both of these websites for any research. And if you still have question and answers, you can always reach out to me.
Okay. So a couple more here. We'll take a few more. Can you distinguish between urolithin A and glutathione?
Sure. So in terms of effects on mitochondria, glutathione probably fits in. If you're again back to the first question, you said there's 3 ways to boost mitochondrial health, right? Glutathione is more sort of increasing the efficiency of your healthy mitochondria, as I say, but it's not gonna activate mitophagy, so it's not gonna cleanse out the dysfunctional mitochondria from your cellular system. That's what makes MitoPure unique. They both are well studied, in clinical trials to have also an anti-inflammatory effect. But that's the differentiation. It's glutathione is not a mitophagy activator.
Okay. So let's see what else we've got here. We've got questions around from Blythe here. Questions around systemic enzymes for joint and tissue health. Anything we have around joints?
So we haven't really done randomized trials to look at, for example, better joint health or reduce osteoarthritis
or tendonitis. I see questions around tendonitis, Achilles.
Now, what we have done is so far a lot of experimental models, and this we did with the Scripps Institute in La Jolla in California. We're working with one of the top gurus there on joint health. What we showed was that even and this was also looking at the joints of people who had osteoarthritis, that autophagy and mitophagy is compromised in the chondrocytes. So these are the cells that kind of are important for joint health. And what we saw was that MitoPure in these models improved activated mitophagy in chondrocytes and was able to, in these models, have less pain, less inflammation, and better mobility in these models. Mm-hmm. We are yet to translate this in human trials.
Okay, we're going to take 2 last questions that came through prior to the session. So we got a first one here from Elizabeth. Hello, I'm an 87-year-old stroke victim, paralyzed on the left side, unable to walk, permanently stuck in a wheelchair. I can make 3 to 5 steps into the washroom, holding onto the grab bar. I've been taking Timeline for several weeks now, and noticing ever slight improvement in my ability to straighten up and slight strength in my limbs. But I'm also taking Dr. Gundry's vitamins. The question I have is it safe to take multiple pills at the same time? I have limited time because of PSWs and physio visits, but I'm determined for a miracle to regrow my dead brain cells and be able to walk again. Any suggestions? Much appreciated.
Well, again, the disclaimer, we haven't really done our randomized trials for recovery from stroke. Now, having said that, knowing what happens in stroke is that you get a lot of muscle wasting. And you lose muscle strength very fast. And so what I hear is that, so typically the MitoPure intake in about a month, you will start seeing the first effects at a sort of a cellular physiological. And in 2 months, from what I'm hearing, is that the lady is saying she's seeing some improved measures of leg strength. So I think that's the time frame that fits well with what we are seeing.
Is it safe to take multiple pills a day? Is there a maximum dose?
So what we have, the maximum pills intake we've studied is 2 grams, and this was one of the earliest studies. But we have kept to studying it looking at 4 pills, which is equivalent to 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams, and that's where we see the data quite a bit, the efficacious data. So I would say there's no harm as long as you can. We do tend to see the moment you go beyond a gram that you do saturate sometimes the exposure levels, and so you just have to swallow a lot of pills, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Singh.
Oh, thanks for
as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we will have one of these a week during the whole month of January. So our first experiment with AMAs. Hopefully this has been useful, and we will be following up with any questions we haven't been able to answer in this session. We will be able to answer those either via email, or we will answer them in a follow-up session. So please do follow our emails. If you don't hear back from us, you can always send us an email, and we will be here to help. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a great
Thank you,
day.
everybody.
Have a great evening in Europe. Bye.
Take care.